Here's what nobody tells you about breaking up with an avoidant. The first week isn't the hardest part because they left. It's the hardest part because of what you did next. You see, there's this moment right after it ends when you're standing at a crossroads. One path feels impossible, the other feels safer, like maybe there's still something you can do, something that might change how this ends. And most people take the second path, not because they're needy, not because they're too much, but because they don't know how to stop trying to fix it. And that's because avoidants don't just disappear from your life. They leave traces of doubt, just enough to keep you wondering, just enough to make you think the door isn't fully closed. And in that first week, when everything reminds you of them, the coffee shop on the corner, that song on the radio, the silence where their voice used to be, your mind does something predictable. It starts trying to solve a problem, the same problem you were trying to solve your entire relationship. How do I get them to open up again? How do I show them I'm safe to love? And that is where the mistakes begin. 5 choices that felt right in the moment, 5 choices that look like hope, 5 mistakes you couldn't have known you were making, but they're the reason you're still stuck now. So let's start with the most common one. Mistake number 1, reaching out for reassurance. You write the message, the long one, the one where you explain everything you've been thinking, how you feel, what you wish you'd said, maybe an apology, maybe a confession, and you think if they just understand it, it will change everything. So you send it, and then you wait. But nothing happens. No text back, no reply, and here's why that happens. They read it and feel pressure, not connection, pressure to respond, pressure to fix your pain, pressure to have an answer when they're still trying to figure out their own feelings. Because, and this is the part that really matters, that message isn't really for them. It's for you. It's your mind trying to get rid of the panic, the confusion, and the regret that you're holding in. You're hoping that putting it all out there will give you relief. And maybe it does for just a few minutes. Then you realize they're not replying, and that's when it hits you all over again. Which means you've now added another layer of anxiety. You're not just wondering what they're thinking, you're wondering what they thought of your message. You're analyzing their silence. You're regretting your word choices. The messages you thought would fix everything just gave you even more to obsess over. Now here's where it gets tricky, because the next mistake builds directly on this one. Mistake number 2, checking on them like your life depends on it. You're checking their social media, going by their home, their work, places they hang out, checking their friends' pictures to see if they're in the background. Over and over again, you're obsessing. You tell yourself you're just checking on them, but what you're actually doing is feeding that anxiety loop. Every time you check, and there's nothing new, your brain registers that as a threat. And if there is something new, it doubles that threat, and it tells you to check again and again and again, looking for answers, looking for clues to see if they've moved on. But here's the problem. You're becoming hyper-vigilant. You're training yourself to believe that relief comes from external validation, from seeing a sign that they still care, that they're thinking about you, that maybe they're struggling too, and you're waiting for some kind of sign that you still matter. But the more you check, the more your brain convinces you that something terrible is happening, which means you start reading into everything. A story they posted means they're moving on. A song they like is all about you. A photo without you means they've erased you from their life. And so you build entire narratives out of nothing. At the end of the day, you can't start to feel calm when you're constantly putting yourself back into panic mode. Because every time you look to them for validation, you're telling your brain that this person is still the center of my safety and my happiness. And as long as they are the center, you cannot build stability on your own. Now, the key thing to understand here is that checking in on them doesn't give you information. It just gives you more anxiety disguised as information. You're not learning anything real from them. You're just feeding that part of your brain that wants to feel validation. Now, if you notice those anxious thoughts growing and it's becoming too much, then follow this link and try the meditation for overthinking. Thousands of people have used it for moments just like this, and it really helps. But right now, let's talk about the third mistake, because this one is what happens when panic turns into action. Mistake number 3 is following up when they don't respond. You've messaged them, but they didn't respond. So you send a follow-up text. You tell yourself, maybe they didn't see the last one. I just want to make sure they know how I feel. I'll send one more, and that's it. I just want some closure to clear the air, to check in, to see if they're okay. But what you're really showing them is that their need for space isn't respected. And to them, that means they'll need to pull away even more. Now, this is where the dynamic shifts, because you're in pursuit mode, and pursuit makes an avoidant retreat, not because they don't want to be with anyone, but because they can feel the desperation. They can sense that you're not just reaching out to connect, you're reaching out because you need something from them to feel stable. And here's where everything falls apart. Every follow-up message tells them, I need you to respond so I feel okay. And what you might not realize is that they feel anxious too, just in a different way. And because they feel anxious, when you reach out again, it can make them feel cornered, like there's something they have to fix or explain. It stirs up guilt, pressure, and the fear that they'll let you down if they don't respond in the right way. Which means instead of coming back to you, they pull farther away so they start to feel calm, more relaxed, and less anxious. Now, to put it simply, you're reaching out to calm your anxiety. They're pulling back to calm theirs, which means both of you are trying to find safety. You're just doing it in completely opposite ways. Now, this next one is where it gets tricky, because those first 3 mistakes you can spot a mile away. They feel like desperation, but this one doesn't. This one feels like strength. It feels like power. It sounds like you're finally taking control, but underneath, it's not that at all. This is the 4th mistake, and it's one that almost every single person makes. The 4th mistake is trying to win the breakup. You start posting your best life on social media. You go out more. You make sure you look good in every story. You want them to see that you're fine, better than fine. You're thriving and you're going to prove it. It feels like you're taking your power back, but what you're really doing is performing for an audience of one. And they can feel that because it's not about joy, it's about proving something. Every post says, look what you've lost. But this is the deeper truth beneath the surface. You're not actually living your best life. You're curating a highlight reel designed to make your ex feel like they made a mistake. Every post has a hidden message, every story is carefully timed, and the exhausting part is that you're constantly checking to see if they viewed it. So now you're not just checking their profile, you're checking your own. You're refreshing to see if their name shows up in your views. You're imagining what they'll feel when they see how happy you are, and what that ultimately means for you is that you've turned your entire life into a performance. Nothing you're doing is for you. It's all strategic, all calculated to get a reaction. And even if they do notice, even if they feel a twinge of regret, it doesn't change anything. Because whether you're begging them to come back or you're performing so they know you've moved on, whether you're doing it because you're heartbroken or because you're angry, you're still doing it for them. You're still looking for external validation that you matter. The method might have changed, but the motivation didn't. Now here's the fifth mistake. And this is the one that keeps people stuck the longest. The fifth mistake is trying to fix their feelings for them. They tell you they feel overwhelmed. They tell you they need time to figure things out. They say they need to be alone to think, and you offer solutions. You send them articles about relationships or videos about attachment styles or whatever you believe will help them see things clearly. Now, you're essentially trying to solve their emotional experience. It's as if you can just say the right thing or have the right insight, and suddenly they will understand. They will realize they made a mistake and come back. Now, here's the difficult but honest truth. When someone tells you how they feel, they're not asking you to fix it. They're telling you their reality. And when you respond by trying to change that reality with logic or insight, you're asking them to confront things they're not ready to face. Let me go a little deeper at this point, because this is critical to understand. Avoidants pull away as a defense mechanism. And people have defense mechanisms in place for a reason. There are fears and patterns buried in their subconscious that feel too threatening to examine. And when those things start to come to the surface, they need a defense against the pain. Think of it this way. Your subconscious defense is like a parent covering a child's eyes so they don't see something horrific. The child senses that something is happening, but can't see what it is. In the same way, your mind pushes trauma out of your awareness, covering your inner eyes to protect you from what feels too painful to face. And what that means to you is this. When you send them articles about avoidant attachment or try to explain their behavior back to them, you're essentially asking them to dismantle those defenses before they feel safe enough to do so. And that doesn't solve anything. It just creates more anxiety. So the takeaway from this for you is simple. The more you try to fix how they feel, the more certain they become that leaving was right. And what that really shows us is that silence is your ally. No contact is your best friend, because that's where doubt starts to grow. That's where they begin to wonder if they made a mistake. And if, and only if, they're ready, they will find their own way to understand why they pull away. And eventually they will face those buried subconscious fears. But they will never reach that point if we keep giving them solutions they're not ready for. Now, we've covered the 5 mistakes, but there's one mistake I need to share with you. A mistake that is far more important than all of the others. Mistake number 6 is making it all about what they did. Look, I know how painful it is right now to replay everything they did wrong. How they blindsided you, how they didn't communicate, how they gave up too quickly. I know it feels unfair, like you're the one picking up all the pieces while they just walk away. And it's perfectly normal to be sitting there building this entire case in your head for why this is their fault. You think they're emotionally immature, they run the second things get real, they don't know how to love anyone, they're cowards, or I had a hard childhood too, but I didn't turn out like that. And maybe they did mess things up. Maybe they did handle things badly. But here's the mistake most people make. They get angry, they blame, but they don't take responsibility for their own choices. Now that's normal because people begin to feel anger and assign blame to help them regulate emotional pain, to make sense of the breakup and protect their self-esteem in the face of rejection and emotional distance. But it can also delay emotional growth. In other words, you stay stuck in victim mode, waiting for them to fix what they broke. And because you're staying in victim mode, here's what happens next. You miss every opportunity to learn something about yourself, about your patterns, about what you actually need in a relationship, and about your own subconscious fears and beliefs, which means you walk away with nothing but a story about how someone else ruined your life. And maybe you did have a difficult past, but you didn't have their exact same past or experiences. And if we never examine our own life, if you never ask what made you choose that person, what made you stay when red flags appeared, then it means you're setting yourself up to repeat the same pattern again with someone new. Because the common denominator in all your relationships is you. And if you don't understand your part, you can't change that pattern. Now, stepping back and looking at the big picture, here's what all 6 of these mistakes have in common. They're all attempts to reduce anxiety by taking action. But the action doesn't reduce the anxiety. It amplifies it by creating new things to obsess over. Now, when you walk away from this, here's the one thing I want you to remember. The fix isn't complicated. It starts with this. Stop acting on every feeling. When you have the urge to check your phone, reach out, perform, or fix something, pause. Notice what's coming up. Ask yourself what it's really about, and then let the urge pass without following it. That's the shift from managing them to managing yourself, from chasing reassurance to building stability, from trying to change them to taking responsibility for your own healing. And if you need help doing that, then check out the No Contact Survival Kit. You can get it from the link below. Right now, though, if you made any of these mistakes in the first week, that's okay. Most people do all of them multiple times, but now you know what they are and why they don't work. And more importantly, you know what they're actually doing to you and your chances of either reconnecting or moving on with your dignity intact, which means you can stop feeding that anxiety loop, stop checking in, stop reaching out, and stop performing to validate your worth. Now, if you're wondering what your avoidant ex is actually thinking during this time, then the next step is to watch this video, the Avoidant Ex Regret Timeline, because it breaks down exactly when and how avoidants start to regret and what triggers that shift. I'll link it on the end screen. Go watch that next, and I'll see you there.